It is the final word. You're with Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon. We were talking Test cricket before the break. We'll do so here as well, with a bit of a pivot to what's going on in Bangladesh. I'm mindful that you had a conversation with Baz about this on the weekly show that I was away for.
Not with any huge depth, or we didn't have the expertise on the subject.
What I thought I would do is get Mohammad Isam, who's been a regular guest to the final word. He's the Bangladesh correspondent for ESPN Cricinfo. He's had that job for, more than a decade now, a close friend of ours as well. He lives in Dhaka. He's living and breathing this at the moment. And I thought I'd just ask him to send some thoughts through. And he's done a great job here. He's scripted his thoughts on how he's seeing what's going on, and more generally, how it's likely to affect cricket.
It is a new dawn for Bangladesh. It arrived on the 5th of August. It has come at a cost of many lives, innocents who were killed in the mass protests across the country in July and August. Some of the deadliest violence in the country's history occurred as the Awami League government went on a killing spree. Hundreds were killed, including students, bystanders, police, and journalists. Finally, on the 5th of August, Sheikh Hasina, who was in power for the last 15 years, resigned and ran off to India. There were jubilations in Bangladesh, but it also was marred by looting, more killings, and more violence. A caretaker government is in place with Dr. Muhammad Yunus, the 2006 Nobel Peace Prize winner, and someone known as the banker to the poor, taking charge. His interim government includes two of the student protesters. It all started in early July when students protested in the streets for fairer job quotas. The country's highest court had ruled that the government jobs would be distributed to ancestors of freedom fighters, but many saw it as an unfair practice. The protests gathered pace when the country's Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina made a disparaging comment in a press conference. The students took offense to it and turned their attention to bringing down the government. It led to the security forces opening fire on the students in many places in the country. The government interrupted the internet, including 5 days of total blackout. As the government saw the unending tide of student protests, the general people joined in. Cricketer Nurul Hassan and coach Nazmul Abedin were prominent members of the cricket fraternity who also joined the protest. On August 5th, Hasina fled in a dramatic turn of events as protesters zeroed in on her residence in Dhaka. The new government came to power a few days later, with calls for reform across all facets of the country. The calls for change came along sports, and cricket in particular, coming thick and fast. Cricket is the most popular game in Bangladesh, and there's growing frustration among fans for the lack of results. Many blame the BCB, and as soon as the Awami League government fell, many started to speak openly about the BCB shenanigans. There are allegations of corruption, favoritism, and high-handedness in the BCB for a decade and a half. Nazmul Hassan is the BCB chief since 2013 and has wielded unbelievable power. He has a group of directors who are mostly loyal to him, and they would take most decisions without consulting relevant people. The cricket was good for a while, but it was always a house of cards. Hassan also happened to be the sports minister of Bangladesh. Talk about conflict of interest. But the BCB is riddled with political connections and conflict of interest. In the current board of directors, there was an MP from Sylhet, son of an MP, a former MP, and the former mayor of Chittagong, all from the Awami League. Then there were two cousins of Prime Minister Hasina in the BCB's board of directors. Two of Bangladesh's leading cricketers, Shakib and Mashrafi, were also Awami League MPs. Discussions on possible reform in the BCB is now a hot topic in Bangladesh. Many have called for resignation of the BCB board of directors, chiefly its president, who hasn't informed his board his whereabouts. Several of the board directors, those with political connections, are missing too. The new sports advisor, effectively the sports minister, is one of the student protesters, Asif Mahmood. He has already spoken about reform, but is mindful of the ICC's governance policy, especially towards government interference. As the Bangladesh men's cricket team prepare for their World Test Championship matches against Pakistan next week, the BCB is lurching from a constitutional crisis. They are also in danger of losing hosting rights of the Women's T20 World Cup, scheduled for October this year. Bangladesh has seen a new dawn, but what about its cricket?
So, yeah, what an interesting situation that presents. Like the idea that I didn't appreciate, I probably could have worked it out, but I didn't appreciate just how linked the BCB board is to the former government. The relatives that were there, the friends that were there, borderline cronyism by the sounds of things there from Isam. But now the new sports advisor, who's on the side of reform, on the side of progressive reform, I suppose, based on what we've seen out of the international agencies reporting on this in the last couple of weeks. He is effectively the sports minister in this temporary emergency government, and he wants to try and keep the BCB going, but he knows that they can't do too much because too much government intervention runs into strife with the ICC. and they don't want to get themselves suspended, because if they get suspended, they can't host the Women's World Cup. Bloody tricky tightrope. So people who are trying to do the right thing at an impossible time, and by dint of just so many people going off the grid, you mentioned there are multiple board directors they can't find. Not suggesting that anything happened to them, but like they've gone off the grid completely. And they're the guys who are responsible for the board of Bangladesh cricket, and they're hosting a World Cup in 6 weeks' time in theory. So thank you to Isam for providing that insight. Bangladesh themselves have got a test series coming up in Pakistan starting next week. There's just an interesting story that came out saying that Karachi won't have any fans at that test match, the second test match, because they're renovating the national stadium ahead of the Champions Trophy. We've got a bit more info on the Champions Trophy too with the groups, Jeff, that Bangladesh's group will include India, New Zealand and Pakistan. Yes, that's right, Jeff. India and Pakistan in the same group again for next year's Champions Trophy.
I think we had the groups, sir.
Did we know the groups already?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise that. Well, anyway, the other groups, Afghanistan, Australia, England and South Africa. So we get to see Australia play Afghanistan in another World Cup, 3 and 3 years.
This is curious. This is 3, well, I suppose the 50 over, everyone played everybody. But the last couple of T20 World Cups, it's worked out that way. But it wasn't expected to have worked out that way because people didn't expect Afghanistan to make the Super 8s. So it's less a stitch up.
And this last point on Bangladesh before we jump off is that I'm reminded of what Richie Benaud used to say about the month of October in the UK. He could never quite believe they didn't play cricket in October here. Like we have such an emphasis on playing in April, right? And so much cricket's played in April when it's fucking freezing. October, it's not freezing. There are cold days, but it's nowhere near as cold as it is in April. It's comfortably a month that you could play cricket in. If Bangladesh can't do this, if it becomes too difficult to host a tournament there, and we wouldn't want that to happen, but surely England's the best shout. Keep they could do it with 3 grounds, 2 county grounds and 1 test ground is my thinking. 3 grounds would be enough. Like let's say Trent Bridge, Essex and Hove, right? You play the group games across Essex and Hove and maybe the tournament opener at Trent Bridge, maybe a few games at Trent Bridge and the finals there. And that could be a really nice way to do it. It could be done in Australia as well, I add, but just wondered about October, and we always think it's unsuitable for cricket, but it is. Climactically, it is suitable for cricket over here. So if Bangladesh isn't right, it shouldn't, I don't think anyway, simply be a case of pumping it off to the UAE where nobody will go, to another tournament that feels all a bit plasticky and all a bit sort of not engaging compared to what you could achieve if you put it in a country that's got a culture of putting on sensational global events, that being England, and they could get Steve Elworthy over from Surrey and say, mate, do you want to go run a tournament for a month? They've got all the infrastructure in place, right?
Yeah. I think India would be more likely for similar reasons in that they've had this success with the men's team. They could try to channel that into getting people out to the Indian women's games and so on and get crowds in there as well. I think geopolitically, ICC board-wise, they'd be very unlikely to take a tournament from an Asian country and not give it to another Asian country. There'd be that sort of sensitivity as well around it, which makes some sense too. And, you know, you can play cricket in India in October. You can find somewhere to do it. So that seems the most likely. But, yeah, I'd never considered England October cricket because I've never been to England in October. I don't know what it's like.
And if you're wondering about the World Test Championship table, now we're more than halfway through the cycle. It's looking pretty good for India and Australia. They're at 68.5 and 62.5% respectively. Then you've got New Zealand and Sri Lanka on 50, and then the rest who are all in the 30s and 20s. I can't really see any of them getting to qualification. So it might be one of those, Jeff, where so long as Australia and India don't beat each other 5-0, that they'll just dance their way into that World Test Championship final at Lords. I think they've agreed to be Lords this time next June. So we'll keep an eye on that one. But yeah, I don't really see a scenario where, you know, short of one team getting pulverised, they're just going to get through, aren't they?
Yeah, if it ends up being a 2-2 with a draw or something, then or even a 3-1 would probably be fine at this point, I suppose. What did New Zealand have to come? They'd have a couple.
They've got a home series against England where they play them 3 times. So I guess that's an opportunity. If they beat England 3-0, they'd be, you know, well and truly in the 60s. The real loss there, you might remember we went through this when we were in Christchurch. Had they beat Australia, as they probably should have in that Christchurch test from where they were, they'd be somewhere in the high 50s with Australia, probably. Anyway,
3-0 would get them to 66%, which would be above Australia as they currently are, but yeah, it's interesting. But I suppose it's more likely to be an India-Australia WTC leading into 5 India-England tests. So that would be an interesting one for those India players. Come out of the IPL, about 3 days later, they'll be playing a World Test Championship final in England, and then into another 5 Test matches, which it might be the case as with Australia that they might start to flag towards the end of that project.
History yesterday, Jeff. History. Ireland's women beat Sri Lanka for the first time. We've been big on what Sri Lanka are doing, but they're playing a couple of T20s followed by 3 one-dayers. The latter will be in the Women's ICC Championship. And yeah, Gabby Lewis did something very special yesterday at Pembroke as well, which is a ground that's dear to my heart, having been there quite a bit and played a game there for Dream Boys earlier this summer. But yeah, Gabby Lewis, 119 from 75 balls to rack up 173 for 3 in their 20 overs, and they restricted Sri Lanka to 166 for 7 to win by 7 runs. Ola Pendergast, who's the coming star of Irish cricket, picked up a couple of wickets, and yeah, they get the job done. So, we spend a lot of time thinking about how close Sri Lanka might be to the next group of teams up the pyramid. Well, so it goes for teams, theoretically at least, beneath them, that they're not far away from Sri Lanka either. So I know we get a bit doom and gloom about the power or the financial clout that Australia has, and similarly England and India when it comes to the comparative balance or comparative tension between the top flight women's teams. But, chuck them into a World Cup, especially a T20 World Cup, and you still can see some upsets.
Well, I think it's also relevant that, say, Sri Lanka won the first game, but that they almost chased that as well. That's a big statement too. They end up making 166 for 7. So Harshita Samaravikrama, who's come along a lot in that last year or so, we've talked a lot about that next tier stepping up, Kavisha Dilhari and so on, to support Adapatu. So that's not a chase where Adapatu has to do all of the run scoring and very nearly got there. So the Irish would have been pretty pissed if they'd managed to lose that game after racking up such a big score.
Just a few bits and pieces before we sign off. Actually staying in Ireland at Pembroke Cricket Clubs, where I interviewed the great Dougie Goodwin 5 years ago on the 50th anniversary of the Sion Mills miracle. If you're not familiar, it's something we've talked about on Storytime before. The day in 1969 where Ireland bowled out the mighty West Indies for 25. It's an extraordinary story. One of those games that you're kind of sad that it was only one day. Clive Lloyd was playing and Goodwin picked him up as part of his 5 for 6 in 12.3 overs. Alec O'Riordan down the other end took 4 for 18. And then, they ended up making 125 for 8 themselves. They put the Windies back in again, and Dougie took a couple more wickets, but finished with match analysis in one day of 7 for 7. Dougie Goodwin's passed away this week. He led a long, distinguished life in cricket. Right. He was a former Irish captain, led the national team on 19 occasions in the late 60s. He also took a 5-wicket bag against the touring Australians, who he captained against in 1968 when they were on their Ashes tour. They nipped over to Dublin and played a game against the Irish, and he had a good day out there too. He played 43 times for his country. He's a legend at Malahide Cricket Club, who hosted the first Test for Ireland. I know there was a lot of emphasis on Dougie Goodwin back in 2018 when they played that inaugural Test match against Pakistan. Huge legacy, Cricket Island Hall of Fame, and a lovely, humble man. He was very keen to let me know, and Vish, who I did the interview with, know that the Windies weren't drunk from the night before. They were perfectly sober, but in the same breath, he was quite humble about his achievements and what they did as well back in 1969 when they were making their presence felt. So Varley to Dougie Goodwin, who passed away in his late 80s this week.
Yeah, what a story it is, and one that I remember enjoying hugely when you told me the story of that game for the first time. And there are those extraordinary bits that come out of the tour matches and the extras, and that's a lot of what we've lost in international cricket, is the opportunity for those extracurricular, those threads around the outside of just the main thrust of Test series here and one-day series there between the international teams.
Jeff, we're not going to talk in depth about the 100 or the Metro Bank. They're both ticking over. And it's just beyond us to stay on top of those comps. There's so much going on. I will tell you that the Oval Invincibles, Adam Zampa's team, have qualified for the Granny. It's a combination of the Northern Superchargers, the Southern Brave, and the Birmingham Phoenix competing for the spots in the men's other final, whatever it's called. And in the women's, the Welsh Fire, soon to be Ryan Reynolds' team, apparently, are first. And then it's the Spirit Oval and Trent who are competing for second and third. How incongruous describing a team as Oval and Trent.
Oval and Trent from Punchy.
That'll all happen in the next few. Yeah, Trent from Punchy. Camp is a sicko. In the Metro Bank, in Group A, it's Somerset, Worcester, Durham, then probably Hampshire or Derby, making the quarterfinals. And in the other group, it's Glamorgan, Warwickshire, and Leicestershire. Then a competition between Gloucester and Yorkshire for the final spot. That's all happening right now because they're playing their final group games on the day that we're recording. The County Championship is back next week, Jeff. Back in business, red ball cricket in the UK. Looking forward to that. We've got our trip to Edinburgh for our final word tour to Scotland, and I'll come back from that straight into county cricket. So we'll be getting out those baggy, those final word baggy cap, baggy blues. Got one in my hand here for the purpose of the YouTube feed. So we've got nine people going up from London, and a couple of people who are playing with us who are from Scotland, which will be heaps of fun. We'll tell you more about that next week.
Okay.
Just on county streams, just wanted to say really quickly that there was a story from Nick Friend in the Cricketer this week about the potential of putting them behind a paywall to help make them financially viable. How about don't do that?
How about not doing that?
How about not suppressing access to county cricket? How about getting some people in and hiring some people who are good at selling ads and popping them on county streams? I don't mean billboards around a cricket ground ads. I don't mean, selling out a golf day. I mean people who have got experience in selling broadcast, stream, digital, online inclusions, insertions, whatever. Monetize it. Make money out of the streams that way. You've got tens of thousands of people coming in of a given day or a week or a match or whatever it is. Don't fucking paywall this stuff. It would be a fucking disaster. Please listen to me. If you want me to do it, I'll do it on commission. It doesn't fucking matter who it is. Bring people in who can flog ads, and that is the answer to monetizing these things and taking that to the next level. It is not stopping people watch it. That would be catastrophic.
Absolute dead shittery of the highest order, award-winning, honours list dead shittery. Like, who comes up, well, it's a great idea. Yeah, let's charge 50 quid at the door for everyone to come into your house party. I don't know if you've noticed this, but not that many people are into county cricket, right? There is an audience. It's not as big an audience as a lot of things. A lot smaller fraction of that audience would be willing to pay for it. People watch county streams out of interest in passing because they go, oh, something interesting's happening. Oh, this bloke's on 173 at number 8. You want to click through and see that. And then it says, would you like to subscribe for £15 a month? And you go, well, no, I wouldn't. I can't be bothered going through the rigmarole of setting up a thing, and do I want to have it for long enough to have it worth paying for it? The thing about charging and paywalls and so on is people, not everybody has the disposable income. B, even the ones who do, don't want to have to think about things all the time. We all have decision fatigue. We're all on the internet a lot. We're making decisions about things all the time. Do you want to sign up to this or this or this or this? You've already got these other streams. Can you justify that and that? And it makes you have to think about it. If you can click on it and watch it straight away, you don't have to think about it. That is the biggest gift you can give to a customer, is you don't have to think about how to do it. The same with being able to rock up at the ground during the T20 World Cup and buy a ticket to watch a game, which you couldn't do in America because you would get shot if you tried to do that. It makes it difficult for people to do the thing. Don't put barriers between people and doing the thing. And, you don't have to plaster your stream with gambling ads. You don't have to put obnoxious, annoying, loud volume, high color inserts. You could just have commercial things that might involve your commentators reading something out. It might just be a natural, innate part of the stream. Here we are, we're watching this game between Derby and whoever it is. If you need a place to stay next time you're in Derby, we recommend the Premier Inn across the road from the ground, and they'll give you a deal with 10% off. It can be as simple as that. And by how many people are going to sign up for the Leicestershire County Cricket Club stream that only has access to the home games and doesn't have access to the away games? So you've then got to sign up for guest memberships to all of the other county streams so that you can get those. Or, yeah, sure, you could conglomerate it all, but that would take 10 years of arguments between the counties as to who got what and who brought the highest share of eyeballs and whether Surrey is the India of the entire enterprise and whether they should get 38% of the revenue and all the rest of that bullshit would go on and on and on. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Use the thing that you have, which is an audience. You know, you don't have to pay to use Facebook, and they make a lot of money because they bring an audience. Yeah, make it work that way.
And that's it. It's just so obvious that the way to do this is to treat it like free media, like free-to-air networks and advertising. And you're right, it's the insertions, right? It's what, without wanting to say that everything we do is perfect with SEN, but what we do on SEN is we have the ads included within the show and it works. Anyway, we'll move off from that. Over 70s World Cup, Jeff didn't intend on spending much time on this, but I just wanted to tell you that England are the over 70s men's world champions. They beat Australia at Wormsley on Sunday. I'm now eligible for veterans cricket, so taking more of an interest in it. It's doing a great job for participation. But so many, it's men at the moment. It'll be men and women, I'm sure, in time, are playing into their 50s, 60s, 70s, which is great. And the other reason this was interesting to me is our mate and former Final Word co-host, Adam White, his old man, Robert White, was playing for Australia, made some runs and took some wickets against India and Sri Lanka. And I know how proud Whitey is of his old man, who's playing cricket in his early 70s. England won by 7 wickets with 10 balls to spare, chasing 209. Their captain, John Evans, made 78. There were 8 countries playing in that. So, yeah, that's something for us to, I'm not saying we would cover veterans cricket, but it's just like, it's lovely to know that it's growing. It's not just there, but it's becoming a really big vehicle for keeping people in the game for longer, and that's got to be a great thing.
Yeah, and there's a big movement about it. Anthony Telfer, who plays for the over 50s Indigenous rep cricket, who I met in Harrow a couple of months ago, is setting up a league in Australia that's going to be over 50s T20 stuff. He's got big plans for that. I'd like to interview him about it at some point on the show because it's an interesting concept. So there is this market. On Storytime this weekend, spoiler, at some point, Murray Goodwin comes up. Murray Goodwin played in the over 50s World Cup for Zimbabwe last year. You know, still has the commitment to want to turn out for Zim, which is awesome. Like there is this world there that doesn't have to be, okay, you've now turned into an older player, so you get pensioned off back to play sixths for whatever your local club side is. There are other possibilities. And I'll tell you what, James Anderson will be eligible for over 50s World Cups in 8 years' time. So
I was going to say, did Jim and I get to play for the England over 50s together one day? I don't know. I suppose we'll see. Just wanted to say one thing in closing today, Jeff. A teammate of mine when I was a youngster, Glenn Butterworth, the Bear, passed away on the weekend. The Bear was my teammate in my seniors debut when I was 14 years old playing against Hampton Park Cricket Club. I remember that he said to me then how important it was that I was going to become a senior cricketer and I'd do it for my whole life. And I thought that was a nice link back through to that. But he was more than that. He was hugely influential on my love of stats and numbers and records and history. He was the statistician at the club. He would produce this chronicle at the end of each season, which would have not only every stat from that season, but every season in the history of the Endeavour Hills Cricket Club going back to the late 1970s. He was there from the start. There were the pictures on the wall of the Bear playing the first game that Endeavour Hills had on turf, the first game at Pargetta, all the rest of it. He was the gentle giant of the club, played, as we're talking about here, up the pyramid, long-term first-team player, down the pyramid to the point where he was teaching young blokes like me as a teenager how to do it and how to do it right. He was also a great Hawthorn man. I think he was the chairman of the We All Support Hawthorn coterie. Used to love seeing him at Hawthorn games, and he contributed so much to the footy club in all sorts of ways as well. So rest in peace, Bear. You were hugely important to me when I was a young fella and had a lot to do with why I love the game so much.
Yeah, that's it's lovely to hear, and it tells you, right, that anybody listening to this, you can have an influence in a positive way on other people in your life. That possibility is open to you wherever you are, however high up or down the pyramid you think you are in terms of power or influence. You can still have that positive influence on somebody, and a lot of the time you'll never know that it happened, but if you go about your life trying to be good to people, then you never know what the effects might be.
All right, Jeff, that's it. I've got to go collect the girls from nursery, and I've got to start thinking about what the next decade of my life looks like. It has been The Final Word. Season 16, episode 31. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Westfield. Thank you to our wonderful patrons, patreon.com/The Final Word. Come to the live show. Join us on Discord. Do all those other nice things with our show, and we'll be back with you for story time later in the week. Bye-bye.
Bye.